Hi folks, this is Don Meissner with the North Country Fishing Report. I was in a grocery store the other day in Messina, and a guy comes up to me. I was in there with my sister and my wife, and this guy comes up to me and he goes, "Hey Don, how are you?" And it'd been years and years since I'd seen him. But he wanted to tell me something that he was almost surprised about, and that is that for up to 20 years, he had not gone back into the Adirondack area to catch lake trout and brook trout. Brook trout are the number one caller. And when I say the Adirondack area, this refers to a massive area that's not that far from us. And the ponds back in that area that contain brook trout. This is one of our real gems of the North Country that a lot of us aren't aware of or don't take advantage of. So he goes back to those ponds that he fished 20 years ago. And you got to walk in. You know, the farther you walk in, the less people are going to do the same thing, and you'll get better fishing. But he said, and he looked at me and he smiled and he said, "Oh, the brook trout." And he held his hands far apart, meaning these were beautiful big brook trout that he remembered from years ago. And he was catching them. But they were also catching lake trout. And a lot of these ponds will have both lake trout and brook trout in them as long as they're deep enough. And so most people don't want to share their secret lures and so forth. But I said, "So how are you catching them?" He says, "Well, for the lake trout, we were using hand lines." And that's something that I've wanted to tell you about before, but it's always skipped my mind because nobody does it anymore. But back years and years ago, people, when they wanted to go into these smaller bodies of water where you had to walk back in, you couldn't take a lot of stuff, they would use hand lines made out of copper. It was called pulling copper. And obviously the line would be heavy. So you wouldn't need to have all the devices they have today to get down deep for lake trout. All the things you're trolling along with planer boards and downriggers and all kinds of stuff to get down deep. Well, in this case, it was just a line. And this line doesn't go on a rod, obviously. It's heavy copper line. So you hold it in your hand. You let it all out there. And he was using a flatfish. But they have what they call cowbells on the end of that line, too, that make noise and that flash so the fish know, oh, something is coming. So then you're holding that line in your hands, and as you're trolling, you're just sort of pulling the line back and forth, or you can let it go steady for a while and then pull. When a fish hits, there's no rod, there's no line to sort of absorb some of the shock. It's your hand, and you feel that immediately. And a lot of people still do that because they think it's the most effective way to catch lake trout. But he told me about that, and I says, "Okay, how about the brook trout? What were you using?" And I didn't expect him to tell me. He said, "Lake clear wobblers with a worm." And I got to tell you, going back years and years ago when I first discovered this pond fishing in the Adirondacks, that was the way most people would catch them. Lake clear wobblers are made here in our upstate New York area, and people in other parts of the country have never heard of them. But it's a wobbling spoon that gives a flash and vibration, and that attracts a brook trout, and then they hit that worm at the end. Bottom line is we have this incredible fishing, and it's just one more thing to put on your list to explore. Even if you've lived here your whole life, there's so many more waters you can explore and I think really enjoy. And this is the time right now that lake trout and brook trout fishing can be great. Fall fishing can be great. Until next time, folks, this is Don Meissner with the North Country Fishing Report.